Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. It is past Thanksgiving. We're into December. There's snow on the ground up here in Minnesota, and that just means we are well on our way to Christmas time. I have been having fun with the xTool P3 in the workshop. I put out a video on kind of the overview, how it works, did some tests, but I thought it'd be fun to play around with some Christmas decorations. So we're going to play more with its features, play more with xTool Studio, and see what we can come up with. So I guess it's time to ditch the summer hat, put on our Santa hat, get some Christmas tunes going, and have some fun. Let's jump right into it. So for the first project, I'm just using this little pine cookie. It's even pre-drilled for like a string or hanging, really just crying out to be engraved to be an ornament. So this is the most basic project we can do on this. I'm not 100% sure where this came from. It's been in my random supply bin here in the shop. We're gonna go ahead and dress this up with some Christmas ornament stuff today. So if you're wanting to do this, you wanna make sure you're working with dry wood. Don't go cutting down your neighbor's branch and just starting cutting cookies into it. You need it to be dry. Even if the laser will engrave on more of the wet wood as it dries, it's gonna crack, it's gonna split. You want them pre-dried, you wanna make sure they're solid before you do this. So let's go drop this in the laser, hop into xTool Studio. All right, we are in xTool Studio. We dropped the cookie over into the laser, and now we are going to use manual mode to set up this project. There's also the automatic creation system, which we'll cover in just a little bit. But first, we need to show you how to do this manually. We're going to first capture the image, and we did leave the top open on the laser because the camera is up in the lid looking down on the bed. So we're gonna come into here over on the right side, you'll see this refresh background icon. We're gonna go ahead and click on that. That will bring in a image of capturing the bed, and you'll see that our cookie is in place. Now, for the next step, it is best to go ahead and close the lid. So I'm gonna go do that. And now we want to have it actually measure the distance. So hopefully you'll see this work. I'm gonna come over here to the precise measurement. We're gonna click on that, and that's gonna bring up a little crosshair that we wanna just bring over to the center of our object. We'll click on that, and you'll see the head's gonna move over. It's going to take a snapshot. Auto measure succeeded. It should make adjustments to this at that point. And now if we really want to make sure we're getting an accurate view, we can go into close shot, bring it over our cookie. It'll bring the head back over and use the camera on the head to actually take a more accurate shot. So it's gonna bring the material up into its kind of focus spot. It'll bring the laser head back over and take a nice close detailed shot of this. And now we have a very clean, highly detailed shot of the object we want to engrave. All right, so now we are ready to work with the object. You could play around with their tools and such, but let's just talk about importing an object in here. I'm going to be using a vector graphic that I have on hand. So we're going to come to this import option, and here I have it, snowman in forest. We're going to go ahead and open that. And it's a little bit bigger than our item, so we can start scaling it down. But you notice also black might not be the best color. You can right click on this and move it to a different layer that maybe is gonna show up a little bit better across things. So we'll move this into the red, and then we're just going to drag from our corners to scale this down. I'm going to zoom in a bit. We can kind of start manually placing this, getting it as big as we want, but not so big that it overlaps. That looks about right to me. Now we can see they do have a nice material library built in. So I'm gonna open up the material library. We can come to wood, and you can search through all these, or we can also come up here and do search materials and hit pine. This is a pine cookie. So they do have them listed, but they have this little icon that says no parameter setting available for this material. So that means it might not have accurate settings for you. And here, yeah, it's on engrave, it's showing 1 in 80. So we're gonna have to do some of our own playing around. You can use the material test tool if you have that option. Definitely, if you're gonna be doing this for business, play around with that, get your settings dialed in. But I'm going to just, from my experience, make a good guess. So I'm going to go 65 power and 1,000 millimeters a second. And our lines per centimeter, I'm going to bump this up to 140. Bidirectional is good. That's it. We're basically ready to engrave. The next thing we can do is hit process. This will give us a preview. It's also going to warn us we might want to remove the air nozzle. They recommend that with engravings, kind of up to you, but it does keep that nozzle a little bit cleaner from any of the vaporization and such. But we're going to go ahead and leave that on there. I don't have the fire suppression gas cylinder in there, so it's also giving us that warning as well. It's giving us an estimated time of 4 minutes, 37 seconds, which is okay. We can go back. One thing though, when importing objects like this, it sometimes is a good idea to double check that it is a solid unite. Okay, so this already is a compound vector. If they're individual items, you might have that option to unite, and then it'll make it more as one object, which can slow it down if they are separate objects. So we want it to engrave as all. This looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and hit start. I'll have to go over to the laser, hit the button, and we'll watch this go. All right, so in here is that first one, all engraved. Came out pretty well. Could maybe have slowed it down just a little bit or added some power. Pine is a little bit fickle in how it engraves. As a matter of fact, if I can get that to go look closely, you'll see the rings. You just get a slight variation in the quality of the engrave and the darkness. But all in all, pretty good for just a stab in the dark at the settings. Like I say, if you're gonna be doing these, a lot of these, you're gonna wanna have some extras. Do a quick test grid on there. You're gonna be able to get your depth and your tone just right. For our next ornament, we're gonna be doing a layered ornament, and I've got some scraps of true flat plywood. This is an MDF core with kind of a veneer finish. This is their walnut variety, and this is their oak. So we're gonna jump back into xTool Studio and see what we can create using up some of these scraps. All right, we're back here in xTool Studio, and we're gonna go ahead and enable auto mode. This will switch how the laser reacts. What it'll do now is anytime you put material in, it'll detect that motion, it'll detect that material is placed and try to autofocus that. So let's go ahead back over to the laser, take a look at that. All right, so as you hopefully saw, it did detect the material, brought it up, measured it, double checked the measurement, did a final measurement, and is now good to go. And it also has dropped the material automatically into xTool Studio. I didn't have to do extra clicks, I didn't have to open and close the lid more than once. And now we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and find a multi-layered ornament. Again, you don't need to have your own designs. We're gonna jump over into their templates section, and you can search. They also have these keywords here. So let's go ahead and click on Christmas, and let's scroll down and see what we can find, looking for maybe a fun layered design for these two. So I'm gonna be looking for something that's gonna look good with some contrast, maybe something a little bit different than what we've done. All right, let's go with this one. This will be fairly simple. It's just two cut operations. So we've got the back layer and then the top. So we can go ahead and open this. We're gonna go ahead and add it to our current project. And so now we have two different items in here. You can scroll in a little bit and see them. And we can also see their height up here. So if you want to switch your settings from metric to imperial, you just come up to that little arrow, come here to inch, and that will change things up here. Again, that was this little down caret here, settings. You go between inches and metric. So we can see here that the height is gonna be about 3.5 inches. So you can kind of adjust it from there as you want. but we are going to need to separate these. So I'm going to right click on it and do an ungroup. We're going to take this one away from here, but I am going to come, you know what I did wrong? We're going to Control Z. I want to make sure that we capture that circle as well. So I'm going to hold Shift and select that as well. Now we can simply drag over this, right click and group. Same thing over here, right click and group. So I'm going to want the angel and the star to be on the lighter color. So we're going to leave that there. I'm going to drag our tree over here to the darker material. And let's go ahead and use this up. I'm going to duplicate that. We'll rotate this around. Let's just go ahead and make a couple of them. Over here. Bring this up here. Again, Control C, Control V to copy and paste. Rotate them around. And that'll use up our material for a couple of these. Now they aren't going to have settings in here. I did go ahead and I ran a material test on this. So I'm going to go ahead and change these operations. It's going to be the same for both of them. So we're going to select them all, move them to cut. We're going to go power 90, speed 35. We're not going to worry about lowering the focus or anything, but this should be good. Let's go ahead and hit process. It'll tell us how long it's going to take. Only 1:45. We do want to make sure that the nozzle is installed because it is going to be using air assist. Again, it's telling me that it doesn't have the gas cylinder for the flame detection, but let's go ahead and send this off. All right, our parts cut out just fine. Everything dropped out cleanly, so we're good to go there. There is a little bit of kind of that vaporization staining on here. That's fine. TrueFlat with its kind of pre-finished out layer, it's going to be able to clean up. But with this kind of fine detail of this piece here, I'm going to want to glue this down first before we go and try to wipe that off. These, good to go. We're just going to wipe them down. So I'm going to use a little bit of Windex. And then just gently wipe these off. You don't need to use anything too aggressive. These will clean up nicely with just a little bit of that. You'll kind of see on the rag that the stuff's coming off. You can do that to both of these. And just get that extra stuff off there. Now, I'm going to be using some CA glue, maybe some accelerator. I'm going to apply it to the back side of the top piece. So we want to get it in enough areas that it grabs everywhere, but you want to be careful not to put too much down and get a lot of squeeze out, because that can show up and slightly ruin your project. Bottom corner. All right. Now we're just going to very carefully eyeball line this up. And press it in place. The CA glue will activate on its own over time. It uses a little bit of moisture from the air. You can use accelerator, but that can also cause it to haze. So I only use it if I absolutely need to. And in this case, I think we'll be okay. I'm going to get this other one glued down and we'll come back to that other one to clean it up. All right, and go ahead and clean this up a little bit. And here you can see the difference between the cleaned surface and the one that still needs cleaning. But that's the nice thing about TrueFlat is it will clean right up. You don't need to worry about sanding, so you can get these finer details looking good. But the P3 did a really nice job on that. And like I say, less than 2 minutes to cut these out. A couple minutes over here gluing them up. and they're ready to go. So there you have it. The layered ornament came out well. The true flat worked really well. We got that nice contrast between the colors, and I like the fact that that engineered pre-finished veneer allows you to clean it up very easily. So you could use your scraps in this. The P3 cuts through it very smoothly, and allows you to utilize those end little pieces to make some fun gifts, ornaments, or some inexpensive kind of lost leaders for your booth. So one of the primary reasons you might get into a CO2 laser is to work with acrylics, especially clear acrylic. So I've got this sheet that I've used on a few different lasers. I've done some testing, but let's see what we can do making a simple ornament and maybe use up a section of this material that otherwise might go to waste. All right, we're back in xTool Studio. The auto mode went ahead and captured our piece of acrylic here. We could still come in and do a close shot, so we're going to be working on that area. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that will grab a up close shot of this piece of acrylic that we're going to work with. Make sure we can maximize its use and get it in the right spot. So let's jump back into our templates section. Let's jump back into Christmas. Let's see if there are something fun that would maybe engrave on here. So let's go ahead and we'll just use these mittens one. They look kind of cool. And it'll allow us to look at both engraving and cutting. So we're going to go ahead and open this. We're going to add to current project. And we really only need one of these. So I'm going to, once again, ungroup. We'll just select half of that, and then we will regroup. And now we can rotate it to fit in our space. Since we're making this an ornament and not an earring, we're going to scale this up a bit. Get it, kind of maximize that area between where I've removed the tape already in that, and then we'll roll with that. The hole might be a little bit small, but now what we want to do is we want to change our material. We're going to come here to plastic, and we got clear transparent, 1/8 inch, 3 millimeter clear transparent. And in this case, we should be able to have the settings done for us. So we've got engrave and we've got score. We actually want to change this to a cut. So for the cut, they're saying 80% power and 19 millimeters a second. And then for the engrave part, let's come back here, engrave. They're saying 10% power and 500 millimeters a second. 200 lines per centimeter. It doesn't take much to frost the acrylic, so that does look about right. So we're going to roll with the pre-applied settings. Going to go ahead and hit process. We'll run over to the laser and send this job off. All right, so this is as it was pulled off from the laser, clean cut and a decent engrave, but it is still a little dusty. Now you got to be careful when engraving acrylic. Sometimes the vapors will actually cause it to kind of get a haze to it, but this should hopefully just wipe off. So I'm just using a clean part of the terry cloth, a little bit of Windex on there. You don't want to rub too hard because acrylic will scratch. You can also dust this off with some compressed air or something, but just want to just gently clean that off. And that came out okay. And then of course, I left the backer on, the masking on the backside, because as it cuts through, when it hits the honeycomb or your rails, you can get a little bit of flashback, and that can cause some little marks on the edge. So I leave it on the back, not on the front, because engraving through that is going to give mixed results, and it also is going to be difficult to weed. So I just need to get one edge started here. And then we should be able to pull the paper masking off. Now this is cast acrylic. You definitely want to be using that over extruded acrylic. If you have a plastic backer on here, a mask, you definitely want to take that off, as it is highly flammable and probably at risk to cause more of an issue. But there we go. Nice frosted look on there. Those settings were pretty good. A nice clean edge along the side. So you could do this on a lot of different colors of acrylic. You could play around with some of the translucents or even the glitter filled ones. Still get that nice frosted engraving on top, but This clear engraving on and cutting on acrylic is one of the big reasons you might look at a CO2 laser. Now, I recently did a video engraving on these glass ornaments, the baubles, that it takes away the top paint layer and then you color fill on the inside. I did this with the new xTool F2 using the curved surface engraving feature. You could do that with the P2 as well. You'd need to dial in your settings. You want to be careful with the CO2 that you don't go too harsh or will actually fracture the glass. The F2 did it really nicely with that IR, removing just the paint. But what I want to do is make kind of more of like a desk hanger for this. And so we're going to make one of those kind of Christmas tree stands where the ornament can go inside of it. And we're going to use up some of the 1/4-inch plywood that I have on hand to do that. So let's jump over in xTool Studio and check that out. All right, we're back in xTool Studio. It's gone ahead and loaded up my material. I had an offcut from one of the projects, so this is going to be a nice way to use it up. Now I went ahead and kind of drew my own object here. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And we have our Christmas tree ornament holder. And now actually we're going to need to go have it refresh this. So I'm going to go open the lid and now we're good to go. We've got our parts up here. So I'm going to go ahead and to make this easier to see, move this to the red layer so you can see all our parts. And it looks like we're going to need to rotate this. So we'll do it that way. And let's grab this. Let's make sure those are grouped. We might be able to squeeze this in right here. Yeah, there we go. That will work nicely. So this is some 1/4-inch plywood. I picked it up from Menards locally. It technically measures about 5 millimeter or 0.2 inches. And so I've got the slot set up for that. And we've got the hook on the tree that the ornament will hang from. Basically, I just need to set up my settings on here. So I did the material test on this and you could see it's even getting through up here at 22, but on any sort of complex type of cut like this, I don't like to go at 100% power for one thing. And I don't like to be where it's just barely getting through. So we're going to come back down to 19 and this is where it's getting through at 80 to 100% power. That's basically how I read my material test cards. See where it'll cut at the maximum, back off from there, because you never know when you're going to have an imperfection. Now this wood is kind of an MDF core with a veneer, so it's fairly consistent, seems to be pretty good, but just some things to be cautioned. Never try to push it at 100%. Your absolute maximum, you'll start having some issues when you have a more complex cut. All right, so with that all ready to go, we can go ahead and hit process. It will give us an estimated time of 1:24. Again, it's just giving us some checks on what it's recommending. Go ahead and hit start and send this off to the laser. So to dress these up, I'm going to add some color, and I'm using this stuff called trans tint. It's a dye that you actually mix with water. So just got some little Dixie cups here, and I'm going to put just a few drops in each and give it a little mix. You kind of want to start light, and you can darken it up if you need, either by adding more dye or adding extra layers. I'm just going to use a foam brush and just paint this on. Similar stain, you want to kind of keep a wet edge and make sure it's nice and even, and maybe wipe off the excess before it dries. And then let it soak in. If you want it darker, like I say, you can add a second coat. Also just using a paper towel here to apply it to the base using that brown. So here are a couple of finished ones. This one was done using that trans tint wood dye. It kind of leaves a bit of a natural look to the wood, but gives it just a little bit of that color. And you can get it darker if you want. You just need to change your mixture or add extra coats. This one was done with acrylic paint. As a matter of fact, the paint pens I like to use before. It gives a little more solid color, but maybe it loses some of that natural look to the wood. So depending on what you're going for, that works out well. And then of course you could also leave it just natural with the wood, depending on the type of wood you're using, how that might look. But kind of a fun way to have a decoration, maybe setting on your desk or on a mantle without necessarily being hung on a tree. Maybe gives it a little more prominence if maybe it's deserved such, and have some fun with it. For the final project, this one's going to be a little bit bigger. I have this 1/2 inch piece of aspen. It's just a little under 3 feet long, so it's just going to fit into the P3. And I want to make a stocking hanger out of this. So we're going to be cutting this out to shape, and I'm going to then be kind of stacking up, layering up some other items on here to dress it up. We're going to be using some true flat plywood. We'll be using some regular plywood as well as some acrylic. So let's hop over to the computer. I'll show you what I've drawn up, and then we'll get to cutting it out on the P3. All right, I've dropped that piece of material into the laser. We've let it auto measure it and whatnot, and we do have a good image of it here. So what I'm looking at is I'm going to have this kind of cut out, and then we're going to make these reindeer be the actual holders. So we're going to have this outline, and then up in these corners, these snowflakes are going to be cut out of the back wood as well. But then I'm going to layer it up. These will probably be made out of white acrylic. The letters up top, the words are going to be out of red acrylic. And then the reindeer are going to be laminated up from layers of true flat plywood for the base. And then the nose, I'm going to make out of a couple different sizes. We're going to make it out of like some 1/4-inch plywood. The base of it will be a little thinner, and then the nose will get bigger to act kind of like the hook. And then we're going to definitely paint those red. We'll make sure the reindeers are brown. Everything is going to kind of be a little more color coded than this. This looks a little psychedelic, honestly. But we'll have it looking pretty good, I think, when we're done. So first thing we're going to do is going to cut out the base piece. So I do have that file set up here. So I'm going to drag this down onto our piece of wood here, get that aligned. And so we want to check both sides, make sure it looks like I'm just slightly crooked. So one thing we can do is we can come up to this degree thing, and I'm just going to rotate it at 0.5 degrees. Yeah, that looks like it kind of straightened up pretty close there with that bottom edge. And then we want to just double check that our snowflakes aren't bumping off there. I think I may just try to bump this ever so slightly up. There we go. That way it gives us some good variance there. So our cut, our outline, we're going to go, I'm going to blast it through at 100% power. Normally I try to keep around 85, but want to make sure we get through this. 6 millimeters a second seems to do fine. And we will lower the focus 1 millimeter. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room in there to get that down too much closer, but we will bring that down just a bit. And a single pass should cut through it. This is only 1/2 inch material. Now, if we were going with 3/4 inch, we'd probably want to get the long lens, the L lens. They do sell a short and a long. The long one is better for cutting. Medium's kind of a mix between the two, and the short is for fine detail engraving. So we're going to go with that. And then these inner ones, they're just going to be score marks. So I've got the power way down, just 20%, just a real light score mark on there. Speed's all the way up at 400. That's the max it'll let us go for scoring. And I've actually brought in the kerf just inside a little bit because I don't want that line to show up when I glue the pieces down. I want it to be just on the edge so we can get them placed, but that they will be hidden. So it's going to score all these out just for a reference point so we get everything lined up, and then it'll cut out the outside. So let's go ahead and hit process. 11 minutes. So about 4 minutes or 3 minutes to score it, 8 minutes to cut it out. And then hopefully everything pops out. We can move on to the next parts. So as you can see, we're adding that score line just to help us with positioning the items later. Once that's done, the cut operation starts. And as I mentioned, we're going at 6 millimeters a second. It is making a fairly clean cut. You always get just a little bit of that initial break-in spot there. But as we get around to the corner, you'll be able to see that the smoke and even a little bit of sparks are going through. A good sign that it is actually cutting through. Once again, using that, almost all of that 36-inch working area. Do want to be careful on these corner pieces that it does get through on those start stops. So we're going to just hold it in place, give it a little check. And most of it does look cut out, but we have just a couple of little nibs to kind of work out just to free up these edges, and then it should just pop right out. Now to make this look a little bit better, I'm going to go ahead and add some stain. This is kind of a weathered gray, give it kind of that nice snowy look to it. So just going to apply this with a foam brush, get it nice and even across the entire board. And then we're going to come back with a rag or a paper towel and kind of wipe off the excess so it's not too thick. We still want to see some of that wood grain. Next, we're going to move on to the white acrylic. We're going to grab the settings from their library, and this is going to be white acrylic running at 90% power, 20 millimeters a second, and it slices through this just fine. Again, I'm leaving the masking on there. It's a paper masking that helps prevent any of the vapors from getting onto the surface of the acrylic, both top and bottom. So we'll just remove that after the fact, but letting this cut out nice and cleanly. And as you can see, they pop right out. So we're going to move on to the words, and we want to get these to fit in without wasting too much acrylic. So I'm just going to move them around a bit. Pick the red acrylic. This time it's 80% power, and again, 20 millimeters a second. Once again, slicing right through, you can see those letters kind of just dropping out as they go. So we're going to go ahead and let this finish up. And then a little trick to pick up the letters is I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape. After we pop the blank out of place, we'll grab that masking tape and just run it across the back here so that we kind of keep all the letters in order. Next, we're going to set up our true flat layers. So with the reindeer, we're going to etch the markings where we're going to glue, and those are going to be at 20% power and 400 millimeters a second. Then we're going to go ahead and cut it out at 35 millimeters a second and 90% power. And these stuck just a little bit, but they did pop cleanly out. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the white using basically the same settings. We're just using up a scrap piece here, and that's where that camera option with the P3 works out very well. And then the final pieces we need are out of a black piece of true flat. These are for the eyes and the mouth. So we're going to go ahead and get those flashed out. I'm using a honeycomb panel just to make sure that they don't drop through the rails. And then once again, I'm going to use the masking tape trick to pick these all up in order. Final thing to do is cut out some of this 1/4-inch plywood. So the bigger spots are going to be the end of the nose. The smaller spots are going to kind of layer up to bring it out, and those will create the hooks. So we got to clean up our true flat plywood. We're going to go ahead and get all of the vaporization stains off there. It doesn't take too long, just a little bit of Windex and a terry cloth here, doing both the eyes and the reindeer faces. And then we're going to go ahead and start gluing these up. So I'm using some thick CA and just putting a small little drop on there. We want to be careful of squeeze out. And then we'll drop the pupils into the eyes, really make them stand out. We'll get all of those done. And then we will move ahead onto gluing those onto the reindeer heads next, just to kind of get our layered up reindeers complete. Now with the acrylic, I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the masking off of both sides, get them kind of placed in approximation there. And then we're using some CA glue to glue these on, just putting a little bit inside the etched lines on the board. Same thing with the snowflake, except we're going to add the CA glue to the back of the snowflake and then just kind of eyeball it into place. Now we're going to layer up these nose pieces. These aren't going to be painted because they're just going to get glued. I'm using a red acrylic marker to color them in red, kind of like Rudolph. And then we can go ahead and glue the reindeer to the backer board. And once those are complete, we can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and glue, but then also follow up with a screw. I'm going to drill a pilot hole, going to countersink them, and using some of these brass number 6 screws, we'll get that tightened right up. And the last thing to do is to laminate that big red nose on the front to act as the hook. And there you all have it, our complete sign ready to hang on the wall. Here is the finished stocking hanger, and looking pretty good. So everything came out pretty nicely. Did the acrylic, the true flat. This is the 1/2-inch aspen wood. I made these nose pieces out of some laminated plywood, used some screws. I think realistically, should probably get some drawer pulls. You could bolt them in from the back side, and then that would be a little more strength and probably be a little bit quicker and easier. But we were able to make everything on the P2 mixed media, and all we got to do is add our choice of hangers on the back, put it on the wall, and it can do its job of hanging up some stockings for the Christmas season. So there you have it, a variety of fun Christmas decorations made on the xTool P3. It did very well with all of these. From the thicker material, longer material, we're using that wide bed down to the detailed engravings on our acrylic, as well as our true flat plywood. Everything came out very well. Happy with it. Had some fun out here. So hope this was inspirational for you. Hope you got some ideas out of it. and hopefully you can have some fun making some Christmas ornaments in your shop as well. If you're curious about anything I used in the video, from the laser to the materials and such, I'll have links down below for that. There'll be affiliate links, and they do go help to support the channel so I can do some fun projects like this to share with you. So always appreciate you using those links, but as always, just happy to share some information with you all. So tell me what you thought. Tell me what you would do differently, or maybe what you would use the laser for, and tell me what you're doing for Christmas on your lasers. So hit up that comment section down below, hit that like button, and if you're new here, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon, but I hope you get out in your workshop and make something too. We'll see you next time.